A kid with no powers walks into a duel against the top sword prodigy in the country, and wins so fast she barely has time to blink. A boy sits in a magic class, stares at a question that stumped professional scholars for decades, and just solves it, casually. Like it's nothing. A student disguises himself as a rabbit-eared beastman at a rival academy, gets shoved into the arena against a literal cyclops, and puts the thing down with a single punch. One punch. The crowd doesn't even understand what they just watched. Somewhere deep in a dungeon that shouldn't exist anymore, a girl is being eaten alive by dark magic, black flames crawling up her arms, her mind cracking, and the only person who walks in to pull her back isn't a veteran hero or a seasoned professor. It's her classmate. And he's not even sweating. And then there's this, a fragment of the most evil thing that has ever existed in this world. Ancient, hungry, furious, cracks open its eyes inside a collapsing dimension. And Leo doesn't run. He steps forward. That's the story we're talking about today. A 5,000-year-old legendary hero, reincarnated, his name scrubbed from every book and monument that ever existed, starting from zero in an academy full of people who have no idea what's standing in front of them. Rewind. All the way back, to the very beginning. Leo Plaub is born in a modest noble household. Not a grand military family, not an ancient bloodline dripping with prestige, just a decent family with a mother who reads him bedtime stories. And one night, maybe 6 months into his new life, he's lying in his crib listening to his mother read from a history book about the great heroes of the world. The ones who saved humanity, the legends, the ones whose names every child knows. And he listens to every single name. His isn't there, not buried at the bottom, not mentioned as a footnote, not distorted into something unrecognizable, just gone, completely absent. Like Kyle, the hero who stood at the center of everything 5,000 years ago, who fought the demon king Erebus at the edge of the world, who died alongside his entire party so that humanity could survive, never existed at all. That's the moment. That's the gut punch. An infant lying in a crib with the full memories of a legendary warrior, realizing that everything he sacrificed has been erased. Not forgotten, erased. And that's all the motivation Leo needs. He doesn't cry about it, doesn't spiral. He catalogs the problem, tucks it away, and starts planning. Because if Kyle's name is gone from the records, something, or someone, did that on purpose. And Leo is going to find out what. But first, the body. The new body is a problem. See, Leo's past life ran on something called all-class energy, a full mastery of all 3 disciplines that humans use to channel mana. Aura, which powers the physical body and weapon combat. Magic energy, which fuels elemental and conceptual spells. And soul energy, which is the spiritual discipline, the one used to form contracts with spirits, mythical beasts, and ancient entities. Most people pick one and commit. The body adapts to that alignment early, and deviating from it later costs you exponentially more effort. Specializing young is just what you do if you want to be strong. Leo refuses to do that, because back in his first life, he ran all 3 simultaneously. That's what made Kyle the hero of the beginning. And Leo knows that if he commits his new body to a single path too early, he'll never reclaim that level of power. So he waits. He lets the body develop without forcing it into any alignment. He builds the vessel before he fills it. That patience will pay off in ways that make people's brains short-circuit. While he's still a teenager, still years away from the academy, his mother, Leo Plaub, starts training him in basic swordsmanship. Reyna is former Zerdinger clan. The Zerdingers are the premier sword family in the country. Generational knights, aura specialists, serious people. Reyna was brilliant. She gave up her career, her aura, her entire physical foundation to save another hero's life. Just chose to take a hit that wasn't hers to take, and burned out her ability to use aura permanently. Leo knows this. He understands what she gave up, and while he trains with her, he doesn't miss the weight of that sacrifice. It layers onto the already heavy thing sitting in his chest. The erasure, the injustice, the list of things that need to be fixed. But he trains, and he gets sharp. By the time he's ready to step into the wider world, he's carrying something nobody else his age is carrying. 5,000 years of combat memory, pure tactical intelligence, and a physical body he's been deliberately conditioning without any single energy type anchoring it. He's also wearing magical weight bracelets on both wrists. Limiter gear. Dense mana-reinforced bands designed to suppress output and make every movement harder. He wears them constantly, for fun. Because when you were the greatest fighter in human history in a previous life, you need to get creative with your warm-up routines. Enter Celia Zerdinger. Celia is everything Leo isn't, at least on paper. Heir to the most prestigious sword family in the nation, dripping with natural talent, her aura already sharpened to a degree that leaves most of her peers eating dust. She's beautiful, she knows it, she's skilled, she knows that too, and she walks into every room like the ceiling belongs to her. She hears about a distant cousin by blood, some minor noble boy named Leo Plaub, and decides this requires investigation. Specifically the kind of investigation that ends with the lesser branch knowing its place. She shows up at the Plaub estate and immediately makes her position clear. She's better, her branch is better, this is a formality. Leo's reaction is approximately 0. He doesn't get flustered, doesn't try to impress her, doesn't get defensive. He just looks at her calmly and asks if she'd like to spar. Celia figures this is going to be quick. She's right about the timing, wrong about everything else. She throws up an aura barrier, that's standard Zerdinger defensive technique, and hers is excellent, solid as a wall, and Leo closes the distance. She's already thinking about where she's going to position for the counterattack. Then he swings. The bracers absorb a huge portion of his output. He's still wearing both of them, and the barrier shatters anyway. Not dented, not stressed. Shattered. One hit. Celia's face in that moment would be funny if she had any time to process it. But Leo doesn't stop. He flows through the broken defense, takes control of the exchange, and has her pinned in about 4 seconds. No aura, no magic, just raw physical technique and the muscle memory of a man who spent decades fighting monsters that make the best modern swordsmen look like children. The deal Leo offers is generous, given the circumstances. She becomes his servant for 1 week. She cleans, she helps with chores, she wears the maid uniform. Celia is absolutely fuming. But she's also someone who respects strength even when she hates that she respects it, so she honors the terms. That week changes things more than either of them expects. Celia watches Leo train. She sees how he moves, how he drills, the depth of his understanding of the blade, things she's been told are impossible for someone without aura to possess. By the end of the week, the arrogance hasn't fully left her, but it's been repositioned. She stops seeing Leo as an inferior branch member. She starts seeing him as something she needs to keep watching. Good instinct, honestly. Leo's next move is his uncle. Zeiss Zerdinger is the vice patriarch of the clan. A powerhouse, a veteran, the man who keeps the entire Zerdinger structure running beneath the official head. He's heard about Leo, and he comes to see for himself. What he finds is a kid who hasn't activated aura yet, moving with the kind of sword precision you only get from 10 or 20 years of elite training. Zeiss is a sharp enough man to recognize what he's looking at, even if he can't fully explain it. He makes a decision. He grants Leo access to Phoenix Breath. Phoenix Breath is the Zerdinger clan's origin technique, their fundamental, foundational aura method, the one that everything else they do is built on. It's not handed out, it's earned, usually over years of demonstrated loyalty and talent within the clan structure. Zeiss bypasses all of that for Leo. Not as a favor, as a recognition. Most people who receive Phoenix Breath spend the better part of a year learning to even activate it consistently. It's a complicated aura technique, designed for high-output physical enhancement, requiring the practitioner to cycle mana in a specific pattern while maintaining physical exertion. Genuinely difficult to coordinate. Leo masters it in under a month, not gets comfortable with it in a month, mastered. Stable output, clean cycle, full integration into his movement. Zeiss watches this happen and just goes quiet for a second. Because this isn't what talented looks like, this is something else. Leo doesn't explain, he just keeps training. By the time the Lumina Academy entrance exam rolls around, Leo is ready. Lumina is the top institution, the one that produces the best knights, the best mages, the most decorated heroes. Getting in means something. Passing at the top means even more. The exam isn't a written test. It's not a ranking ceremony. Professor Albi Zeron, the decimator of Tartarus, a man who has personally hunted and killed more demons than most military units see in a decade, takes the candidates and drops them directly into a hero's world. Specifically, an elven forest environment derived from an ancient hero record. Real monsters, real danger, no hand-holding. The logic is simple. If you can survive this, you deserve a seat at the table. If you can't, find another school. Most of the candidates form groups fast. Safety in numbers, pooled abilities, the usual strategy. Leo goes a different direction. He finds Chelsea Llewellyn arguing with a group of candidates about whether to cooperate or split up. Chelsea is from the Llewellyn family, a battle mage lineage, elemental magic as the primary weapon, and she's genuinely talented. She's also stubborn, confident in her own read of the situation, and not particularly interested in what anyone else has to say. Leo walks up, listens to the argument for approximately 10 seconds, and cuts through it. Not rudely, just efficiently. He tells Chelsea the optimal path through the exam, lays out the logic, and makes it clear that following him is the right call. Chelsea pushes back on principle. Leo doesn't push back on that. He just starts moving in the direction he described. She follows. The Elven Forest is wild. Monsters from across the ancient period, operating on rules that the modern adventuring community has mostly forgotten. Leo navigates it like he's walked this terrain before, because in a sense he has. Ancient monster types are things he fought in his past life, and he recognizes behaviors and patterns that the modern textbooks don't even document. He keeps the group moving. He keeps them alive. He positions Chelsea where her elemental output does maximum damage, patches holes in the group's formation, and reads the forest in a way that makes the other candidates increasingly uncomfortable, because no one this young should be this calm. Then things escalate. The Spider Princess shows up. This isn't a regular monster. The Spider Princess is a major threat, the kind of creature that would be a disaster even for a prepared squad of veteran adventurers. It's a Tartarus-affiliated entity, massive, layered defenses, fast for something its size. The candidates don't have the firepower to bring it down cleanly. Leo's plan is immediate: stall. He doesn't try to kill it. He buys 5 minutes. 5 minutes of keeping this thing occupied without using aura. Just footwork, positioning, timing, reading every attack before it lands and being somewhere else. He baits it, redirects it, makes it chase angles it can never quite close. It's absurd to watch. A boy with no apparent powers running circles around a monster that could crush most of them with a single swipe. While Leo burns those 5 minutes, Celia and another candidate named Abad set up the finish. Celia's aura output, Abad's power, combined at the right moment, they drive a coordinated strike through the Spider Princess's defense and end it. Leo walks out of that exchange without a serious scratch. The other candidates are staring at him. Celia is staring at him. Even she, already knowing what he's capable of, is recalibrating. They pass the exam. Leo passes it at the top. The freshman orientation ceremony at Lumina is a big deal. Parents in the audience, faculty assembled, the incoming class all standing at attention while speeches happen. The academy director says his piece. The guest speakers say theirs. And then Leo, as the top candidate, is invited to say a few words. Most top candidates say something polished and humble. Thank the faculty. Express enthusiasm. Promise to work hard. Leo walks to the podium, looks out at the entire incoming student body, and announces, clearly, in front of everyone, that any student who thinks they deserve the top spot is welcome to come and take it from him. Not aggressively, not with posturing, just as a statement of fact, like he's reading the weather forecast. The auditorium goes a little insane. The freshmen are half scandalized, half electrified. The faculty is visibly conflicted, and the returning upperclassmen in the back are clocking this new kid and filing his name somewhere memorable. Leo steps down from the podium and immediately starts figuring out how to enroll in 3 majors simultaneously. The Elven Forest excursion is supposed to be a guided cultural exchange, structured, supervised, academic. Walk through the ancient woodland, observe native spiritual ecology, learn something about how the elven relationship with natural magic differs from the systematized approach Lumina teaches. Educational, safe. It stops being safe the moment Lauder shows up. Lauder is a senior student from Saren, one of the other institutions in the region, not Lumina. He's been operating in the Elven domain under a cover that looks legitimate enough on the surface, the kind of documentation that clears basic checkpoints without triggering serious scrutiny. What he actually is a man who made a specific and catastrophically bad decision. He accepted a demonic ring. The ring is Tartarus issued. Black market, derived from the same corruption infrastructure that produced the grimoire that nearly destroyed Chloe. But where the grimoire was a passive influence, power available for the taking, working on existing ambition, The ring is more direct. It gives Lauder access to genuine dark magic output that he could never produce on his own, and in exchange it eats into him in ways he's been choosing not to think about. What Lauder is after in the Elven Forest is a hero record fragment. Specifically, the lost fragment containing Luna's record. Luna, the founder of Lumina Academy, the same young girl that Leo knew in his past life, left behind hero record fragments scattered across the world. This one ended up in the Elven domain, buried under centuries of forest growth in a location that most researchers don't even know to look for. Lauder has a map. The map came from Tartarus. If a Tartarus operative gets their hands on Luna's hero record fragment, they can do things with it that Leo doesn't want to think about in too much detail. Corrupting a founder's record is the kind of damage that compounds. It doesn't just destroy the fragment, it reaches backward through the historical chain connected to that fragment and poisons it. The educational lineage of Lumina. The hero techniques that derive from Luna's work. The magic theory she developed during the Age of Calamity that is still quietly foundational to half of what modern sorcerers practice. Leo tracks Lauder through the forest. He's not alone. Runia is with him, an elven girl connected to the local lineage, and Erin joins them once she understands what's actually happening. The three of them move through the forest quickly, following the traces of dark energy that Lauder's ring leaves in the spiritual landscape of the woodland. To Leo, the trail is obvious. To a modern tracker, it would be nearly invisible. They find Lauder at the site of the fragment, and he's already activated the ring to full output. Dark magic at full ring output is not subtle. The forest around Lauder is visibly wrong. The trees at the edge of the corruption radius have started to turn, bark going dark, the natural spiritual energy in the air distorting into something sour. The ring has called up a summoned construct as well, a Death Knight. Not a natural monster, not a summoning class familiar, but an artificial construct built from dark energy and shaped into something that hits like a battering ram and absorbs damage like a fortress wall. Lauder's attitude in this moment is the specific brand of arrogance that comes from borrowed power. He didn't build the ring's capability. He didn't develop the techniques it enables. He just put it on and started spending resources he didn't earn, which gives him the confidence of someone who believes the weapon makes the warrior. He tells Leo and the others that they're outmatched, that the ring's power is beyond anything 3 Academy students can handle, that the smart move is to step back and let this proceed. Leo looks at the Death Knight, looks at Lauder, looks at the ring. He says, simply, that the problem with borrowed power is that it never quite fits right. You can see the seams if you know where to look. Then he closes the distance before Lauder finishes processing the response. The Death Knight is the bigger immediate problem. It's constructed to absorb and redirect force, which means straightforward aura-enhanced attacks just feed it. Leo doesn't use straightforward aura-enhanced attacks. He works the construct's internal logic, finding the points where the dark energy binding is structural rather than just defensive, and applies force there, not to break through the defense, but to destabilize the architecture underneath it. The Death Knight is built to take hits. It's not built for someone who's attacking the construction principles rather than the exterior. Runia and Erin manage the perimeter, keeping the corruption from spreading further into the forest, giving Leo the controlled space he needs to work the construct without the environment actively fighting them as well. Erin's knowledge of elven forest magic, combined with Runia's connection to the local spiritual currents, lets them hold a containment that a proper dark magic specialist would need a full team to establish. The Death Knight comes apart, loudly. Lauder, watching his summoned construct disassemble under attacks he can barely follow, makes the mistake that people with demonic rings consistently make. He pushes the ring harder, demands more output. The ring responds, because that's what it's designed to do. It gives you more and more and more, and the cost of that more is a debt it collects from the inside. Leo doesn't let him get far into the escalation. He's through Lauder's defense before the additional output fully manifests, and the engagement ends fast. Lauder, stripped of his construct and facing someone who moves with a speed and precision that the ring's borrowed power can't match, has nothing. Leo takes him apart piece by piece, not brutally, but completely, until Lauder has no more moves left. The ring, at this point, decides it's done waiting for repayment. It consumes him. That's the final clause of a demonic ring contract, always. When the user runs out of road, the ring collects. Lauder's end is fast, at least. The ring burns through what's left and goes dark. Leo secures the Luna fragment. He doesn't open it, not here, not now. He wraps it in a containment method he learned in his past life and tucks it away for handling in a controlled environment. The fragment is safe. The fragment is also, he notes, reacting to his presence in a way that inert fragments don't usually react to strangers. He chooses not to examine that too closely right now. What he does examine, while they're moving back through the forest, is something he spotted on the ground near the Death Knight's collapse site. Half buried in the disturbed earth, old enough that the forest has grown partially around it, is a dagger. Leo pulls it free and turns it over in his hands. He knows this dagger. It belonged to Berkia, his past life companion, one of the party members who stood with Kyle at the end of the world, 5,000 years ago. Berkia was a specialist in star magic, specifically in a technique category that the modern era has completely lost track of. The magic of falling stars, not the astronomical phenomenon, but the conceptual principle of something vast and distant brought to Earth with precise, devastating intention. The dagger shouldn't be here. It shouldn't exist in recoverable form. How it ended up buried in an elven forest after 5 millennia is a question that has a complicated answer that Leo doesn't have all the pieces of yet. He holds it. The metal responds to his grip like it remembers him, which is not physically possible and also clearly happening. The old bond between a weapon and the person it was made for, preserved through whatever process preserved the dagger itself. Runia and Aaron watch him hold it. They can both feel that something significant is happening. Neither of them knows exactly what. Leo looks at the dagger for a long moment. Then he raises his eyes to the forest ahead of them, specifically to the thing he's been sensing approaching through the trees for the last several minutes. The Skeleton King. It's what manifested in the wake of Lauder's corruption spreading into the forest before they contained it. A high-rank undead construct pulled together by the dark energy saturation. Massive, ancient bones animated by something that predates modern necromancy and operates on rules that modern monster classification doesn't have a clean category for. It's huge. The trees at the edge of the clearing crack where it steps. The others are already repositioning. They understand that what Runia and Aaron can maintain as containment support and what this thing requires as a primary threat response are different scales of problem. This one needs to be ended, not managed. Leo looks at the Skeleton King, looks at Berkia's dagger in his hand. He steps forward alone. This is the moment. Not for strategy, not for careful dismantling. This is for Berkia. For the comrade whose weapon survived when so much else from that era didn't. For the 5,000 years of separation, the erasure, the long silence between then and now. Leo activates the dagger's latent resonance and calls the technique that Berkia built his entire combat philosophy around. Finale. Star magic at its full expression isn't a beam or an explosion or any of the standard combat magic formats. It's a call, an invocation of something that exists at a distance and brings it into intimate contact with a specific point. Stars fall, not metaphorically. The sky above the elven forest tears open in a perfect column of light and something comes down through it. Not one thing, not a meteor strike, but a rain of impact points, each one precise, each one carrying the weight of something that has traveled an incomprehensible distance to arrive exactly here. The Skeleton King is obliterated. Not damaged, not knocked down. Obliterated. The construct unmade at the foundational level. The dark energy that animated it dispersed by something so fundamentally opposed to darkness that no residue remains. The elven forest goes quiet. Then it goes very, very quiet in the specific way of a space where several people are trying to process what they just witnessed. Erin is staring at the sky, then at Leo, then at the sky again. Her expression is doing something complicated, because she knows star magic. She's studied it as part of her research into the Age of Calamity, into the hero Kyle, into the combat techniques that only existed in that era. She knows what finale is. She knows who developed it. She looks at Leo. Leo sheathes Berkia's dagger carefully, treating it with the specific reverence of something that was trusted to him by someone he lost. He doesn't explain. He offers Aaron a small, quiet acknowledgement. Not confirmation, not denial. Just the recognition of a question he knows she's now carrying. She's smart enough to hold on to it rather than demanding an answer he's not ready to give. They bring the Luna fragment back. The Elven authorities conduct their investigation into Lauder's infiltration, the corruption is cleared from the forest section, and the official record of the incident credits the containment to a coordinated student response, which is technically accurate if not fully descriptive. The elven elders make private notes about the human student from Lumina, who apparently knows star magic techniques that only appear in the oldest fragments of their historical record. These notes end up in the same file that several Lumina professors are quietly building about Leo Plaub. The file is getting thick. Back at Lumina, the academic year continues its forward motion, but the context is shifting. The midterm victory and the El Salbequia incident have circulated through the student body in the distorted form that interesting stories always take. Fragments of what actually happened, amplified in the exciting parts, confused in the technical parts, and arriving at a version where Leo Plaub is either a genius, a fraud, a threat, or some combination that depends on who you're asking. The student council is monitoring him with Elena's particular brand of focused interest. The demon-hunting faculty, led by Professor Albi Zarin, are quietly adjusting their assessment of what resources Tartarus is deploying and why a freshman keeps intersecting with the results. Professor Edmund, the Wailing Wall, watches his Class 1-5 students and notices that the difficult ones, the ones who came in with rough edges and no clear trajectory, are quietly sharpening. Not just Leo, all of them. The classroom dynamic that Leo generates is one where mediocrity becomes uncomfortable, and that turns out to be good for everyone around him. The interdepartmental tournament is announced. It's a major event. Multiple departments, multiple year groups, competition structured to showcase a range of ability types. Students train for it. Strategies get developed. The social landscape of the academy shifts around it because tournaments at Lumina determine a lot about how students get perceived and resourced. Then the lockdown hits. A traitor is operating inside Lumina's walls. The evidence has been building. The corrupted hero record demonstration, the Cheddar Dungeon incident, the dark grimoire that reached Chloe, and the administration can no longer treat these as unconnected events. They implement total lockdown, sealed gates, communication restriction, internal investigation protocols. Students are confined to designated areas, and the tournament structure is suspended pending security clearance. Except the tournament's preliminary event has already deployed its participants. The Battle Royale component, held in an external site, a cursed abandoned city called Negrong, is in progress when the lockdown seals in. Negrong is a city that stopped being inhabited for reasons. The urban ruins carry a communication-blocking curse that predates the Academy's awareness of the location. It was supposed to be a controllable variable in the tournament structure, a way to force students to operate without backup and make independent decisions. Under lockdown, with the communication block active, it becomes something different. A sealed environment where students are cut off from both internal and external support. And something in Negrong has noticed the opportunity. Monsters are moving into the ruins from the surrounding territory. Not random encounter-type monsters. Organized incursion, the kind of pattern that suggests something is directing the pressure. Students who entered for a competition are now dealing with a survival scenario, without communication, without the ability to call for evacuation. Leo surveys the situation with the methodical calm of someone who has been in worse positions than this and has data on what makes them survivable. What the students in Negrong need is coordination. They came from different departments, different year groups, different approaches to combat and magic. Most of them are operating in the small groups their tournament brackets put them with, which means no one group has enough breadth or depth of ability to handle what Negrong is throwing at them. But if you combine the top talent across all the freshman groups, the best knights, the best mages, the best summoners, you'd have a functional raid composition, the kind of team that can handle organized incursion. Leo starts moving through the ruins, finding the other top freshmen and making the case. Not everyone is receptive. Some of them have been competing against each other for months, and the instinct to treat a classmate as a rival rather than a resource runs deep. Leo doesn't argue. He lays out the arithmetic. Here is what is coming toward us. Here is what any individual group can handle. Here is what a coordinated unit can handle. The choice is obvious if you set aside the pride component. Most of them set it aside. Duran is the interesting one. He and Leo have been in a specific kind of competitive relationship since the night race. Not hostile, but charged. Duran's competitive drive is the real kind, the kind that actually respects someone who outperformed you, because at least that means the competition is worth something. He looks at Leo's assessment of Negrong, looks at the monster pressure building at the ruins' edges, and joins the group. Not enthusiastically, but he joins. Chen Xia is easier. Chen's read of the situation aligns with Leo's almost immediately, and his water spirit martial arts gives the group something they don't have from the knighthood-heavy composition: adaptable close-quarters flexibility and spiritual sensitivity that serves as a natural early warning system. The coordinated freshman raid group clears through Negrong's outer districts faster than any of them would have managed independently, and the gap between what they can do assembled versus separated is immediately obvious to every person in the group. The coordination isn't just practical, it's educational in real time. Then the Gigantes shows up. 15 meters. That's the scale of the thing. Not the height of a building, but a single creature that stands 15 meters and moves with the weight of something that has never encountered an obstacle it couldn't walk through. Gigantes are a classification that the modern adventuring community handles with siege-level preparation. Ballistic implements, large-scale aura formations, coordinated strike teams operating with flanking precision over extended engagement windows. The kind of fight you plan for days in advance with proper equipment and clear communication. Leo has an unplanned freshman raid group in a cursed city with no external communication. He does what he always does, reads the composition he has, and builds the approach from what's available. The Gigantes fight is coordinated on a scale that none of the students have attempted before. Spatial assignments, attack sequencing, role differentiation that keeps the creature's attention fractured across multiple simultaneous pressures. Duran handles the flanking harassment, lightning aura at high output, fast enough to make the Gigantes track him rather than committing its full mass to any single direction. Chen manages the environmental variables, water spirit techniques creating terrain disruption that forces the creature's footwork into Leo's planned positioning. The mages in the group handle sustained bombardment in timed rotations that maintain damage output without letting any individual run dry. Leo takes the front. That's the piece none of them fully prepared for. Watching Leo engage a 15-meter construct at the forward position and move like the size differential is a problem the Gigantes has, not him. Phoenix breath at full output, combined with the physical technique built from a lifetime of memories, creates a fighter who doesn't just match the creature's power but redirects it. The Gigantes hits, and the force goes somewhere Leo chose. It grabs and finds nothing where Leo was. It tries to create space, and Leo fills it. The opening arrives and Leo takes it. Phoenix step off the Gigante's own arm, elevation gained in a single explosive movement, and a combined finishing strike that comes from Leo, at the peak of the arc driving force down, while the rest of the group delivers simultaneous impact from the flanks. The Gigantes goes down. The freshman raid group stands in the ruins of Negrong, in the post-fight silence of people who just did something they didn't know they could do. Leo is already cataloging the next problem. Somewhere in Negrong, underneath the cursed city's surface geography, there is a lake that shouldn't exist. Leo finds it the way he finds most things that other people overlook, by paying attention to details that don't match the expected pattern. The curse on Negrong suppresses communication and disrupts standard magical sensing, but it doesn't suppress everything. There's a specific frequency of spiritual energy that the curse wasn't designed to block, because the curse was built by people who didn't know what they were looking for. Leo knows what he's looking for. The lake sits in a cavern beneath the ruins, accessible through a collapse point that looks like debris and is actually a passageway. The water is still, not calm, still in the specific way of something that has been waiting rather than resting. The surface carries a luminescence that has nothing to do with the absence of sunlight and everything to do with what lives in it. Leo steps to the edge of the water and waits. Luminous rises. The ancient spirit has been in this lake for a very long time, ancient in the way that makes the Fairy King Silrod look like a recent arrival by comparison. Luminous predates the established categories that modern spirit taxonomy uses. It exists at the boundary between spirit and concept, which means its awareness operates across a time frame that most conscious entities can't meaningfully navigate. It knows Leo immediately, not because he announced himself, not because he carries identifying documentation, because Luminous was there 5,000 years ago. Not the same form, ancient spirits shift expression across eras, but the same fundamental awareness, and that awareness recognizes Kyle, the way you recognize the shape of a mountain, even when the weather changes. Leo tells it who he is, not as a claim requiring proof, but as a statement of fact to something that already knows. He tells Luminous what he's been doing, what he's found, what he knows about the erasure, and what he suspects about the mechanism. Luminous listens. There's a conversation that happens at this lake, that is private in the specific sense of not belonging to anyone outside of it. What gets exchanged isn't just information, it's recognition. The acknowledgement of something that was real and mattered, being received by an entity old enough to confirm its reality. Leo has been carrying his past life's identity as a solo certainty, known only to himself, for the entire span of his current life. Having Luminous look at him and simply know is something that hits differently than he expected it to. He doesn't show it. He barely shows anything. But Luminous, being what it is, notices the weight shifting. The blessing Luminous gives Leo is called the blessing of light, which sounds simple and is the opposite of simple. Light in this context is not the elemental category that Lumina's magic curriculum teaches. It's the fundamental principle, the kind of light that exists at the level of concept rather than wavelength, the kind that ancient entities used before human magic theory systematized it into something approachable. The blessing doesn't add a new tool to Leo's kit. It adds a dimension to everything already in his kit. Magic, aura, soul energy, all of it becomes capable of carrying the light property when Leo applies it. Against dark magic, against Tartarus constructs, against demons operating on the corruption principle that Erebus established as the foundational architecture of his power, the blessing of light is approximately the worst possible thing you can add to an opponent. Leo files this away with the specific satisfaction of someone checking an item off a very long list. He leads the freshman group out of Negrong through the pathway he discovered. The lockdown is partially lifted by the time they reach the academy perimeter. Enough communication restored that evacuation protocols can execute. The students who went into the battle royale for a tournament come out having survived an actual incursion. The academy processes this with the institutional efficiency of an organization that has protocols for everything and is quietly alarmed that the protocols got tested. Leo's role in organizing the Negrong response circulates through the faculty reports and lands in the desks of approximately 7 professors who are each individually maintaining their own file on Leo Plaub and who are each individually reconsidering how thick those files are going to get before the year ends. The undercover Azonia mission is Leo's idea, executed with the specific brand of methodical audacity that has become his signature. Azonia Academy is the 3rd major institution in the region. Different structure than Lumina, different admission philosophy, different power distribution among its student body. Where Lumina emphasizes balanced development and Serene leans academic, Azonia is built around a more direct meritocracy of raw capability. If you're strong enough, the institution accommodates you. If you're not, it finds that out fast. Leo wants access to Azonia's hero record repository. There's a specific fragment there, one connected to a hero named Aaron the Brave, a beastman who in the historical record is associated with the Age of Calamity, but whose connection to Kyle's party is something that the modern records don't accurately capture. Leo knows Aaron. He fought alongside him. And the fragment in Azonia's possession is not just a historical artifact, it's a potential training environment, a hero's world that might contain information relevant to Leo's ongoing investigation into the erasure. Getting official access as a Lumina student is complicated and slow. Leo prefers not complicated and slow. He disguises himself as a mixed-blood rabbit beastman and takes the Azonia entrance exam. The disguise is detailed in ways that suggest Leo either has extensive knowledge of beastman biological characteristics or spent a very productive afternoon doing research. The rabbit ears are the most visually prominent element, white, mobile, absolutely convincing, and the overall presentation reads as a young beastman of modest background applying to Azonia under the name Kyle. The name choice is so specific that it's almost a private joke, almost. The Azonia entrance exam is structured around a combat assessment in a formal arena. Applicants demonstrate their abilities against assigned opponents, with the examination committee evaluating output, technique, and result. It's direct and unambiguous. Azonia doesn't test theory or historical knowledge or academic potential, it tests whether you can fight. Leo is assigned to a standard combat bracket. He's presented in his rabbit beastman form, assessed visually as a small mixed-blood candidate with no obvious combat indicators, and matched accordingly. His first several opponents are selected based on the committee's read of his apparent physical tier. The committee's read is wrong in ways that become apparent quickly. The first opponent goes down fast. Leo's restraint is calibrated. He's here to access the hero record, not to make himself memorable, so the goal is adequate performance rather than spectacular performance. Adequate performance at Leo's actual level is still considerably beyond what the committee expected. The matches progress. Leo keeps the output controlled. The committee keeps adjusting their read upward with each match, which keeps producing opponents who are closer to challenging but still not quite there. Then a cat girl named R2 gets assigned to the same bracket. R2 is a Beastman candidate with genuine talent. Fast, instinct-driven, operating on a combat philosophy that emphasizes reaction speed over planned technique. She and Leo end up in adjacent brackets during the exam's final stage, and the proximity means they interact more than the standard exam structure would suggest. R2 notices that the rabbit beastman she's been watching fight is doing something she can't quite categorize. The movements are too clean for improvisation but don't match any recognized school. She watches him with the focused attention of a fighter trying to learn something, and files questions she intends to ask later. The final exam component involves a large-scale challenge, the kind of multi-opponent or environmental hazard test that Azonia uses to assess how candidates perform when the problem exceeds their individual capacity. The specific challenge this cycle involves a Cyclops, single creature, massive, durable. The kind of exam obstacle that forces candidates to either collaborate effectively or demonstrate individual capacity sufficient to neutralize the threat without collaboration. The exam committee expects either a coordinated group approach or a very extended single-candidate engagement. Leo walks to the front of the candidate group. The other candidates, watching the rabbit-eared beastman separate from the group toward a creature 3 times his visible height, experience a moment of collective uncertainty. Leo hits the Cyclops once. The physics of what happens next are technically describable. Phoenix breath at full output, concentrated into a single strike, delivered at a structural point in the Cyclops' anatomy that maximizes the force transfer. But the visual experience of watching it is simpler. One punch, and the Cyclops comes apart. Blood and impact. The creature doesn't stagger, doesn't fall. It's simply no longer a functional entity. The candidate group goes completely silent. The exam committee goes completely silent. R2 has stopped moving and is staring at the rabbit-eared beastman in the center of the arena with an expression that has moved past surprise into something more fundamental. Whatever she was expecting from the competition, it wasn't this. Leo straightens his jacket, checks his disguise, and waits for the exam results. He passes, obviously. He passes at a level that the Azonia admission system wasn't designed to process cleanly, which creates some administrative friction that doesn't concern him because he's already navigating toward the hero record access he actually came for. The Aaron the Brave fragment is housed in Azonia's records vault, and Leo gets access to it in the post-exam period when successful candidates are given limited library access as part of the enrollment orientation. He locates the fragment, approaches it with the specific care that his past experience with volatile records has taught him, and interfaces. The fragment activates. That's normal. What's not normal is that R2 is standing 2 feet away when it does, and the activation radius catches her. They go in together. Aaron's hero world is built from the foundational memory of a young beastman who was, at the beginning, not remotely what he eventually became. The Aaron in this world is early, before the courage, before the legendary status, before the reputation that made his name worth carving into historical records. This Aaron is afraid. Specifically, he's afraid of heights, of demons, of the gap between who he is and who he needs to be to protect the people he cares about. The world positions Leo as Professor Archon, a role that the record assigns to the version of the past that the memory was built from. The real Archon was an instructor who worked with Aaron during this period. Leo steps into the role because the world requires it and because he understands, from personal memory, what Aaron needed to hear during this phase of his development. R2 is present as an observer. The world doesn't assign her a role because it wasn't built around her, which means she exists in it with more awareness than the projected characters. She watches Leo navigate the memory environment and notes, with the precise attention she's been paying since the Cyclops punch, that the rabbit beastman is moving through a historical memory like he knows the terrain from the inside. Young Aaron is facing the specific crisis that the record was built around, a situation where children, orphans under the care of a temple in the elven territory the record is set in, are threatened by a spider demon. The demon is significant. Not in scale, it's not a knight rank, not a gigantes, but in what it represents, because defeating it requires Aaron to do something he has never done. It requires him to step forward anyway. Leo works with Aaron the way a good instructor works. He doesn't solve it for him. He can't. The hero world is built on the logic that Eren has to find the answer inside himself or the memory doesn't progress. What Leo does, as Professor Archin, with the knowledge of who Eren becomes, is dismantle the arguments that fear makes. He does it directly, without sentimentality, acknowledging that Eren's fear is real, and then explaining why it doesn't get the final vote. Eren listens. He's stubborn and scared, and exactly the kind of person who can go either direction under pressure. Leo finds the thread, the specific thing Eren cares about more than he fears, and pulls it. Eren steps forward. The spider demon, named Talatanya, a demon of the Age of Calamity that Leo actually fought in his first life, manifests at full output when Eren commits. Leo handles Talatanya directly, because the world's logic assigns the demon to the instructor role's responsibility once Eren has made his choice. The fight is brief. Talatanya is real in the world's terms, which means it has real combat capability, but Leo has fought things that make Talatanya look like a warm-up problem. What he's focused on, more than the demon, is Eren. Watching the young beastman protect the orphan children with the trembling, determined effort of someone doing something terrifying because they decided the terror wasn't an excuse. It's one of his clearest memories from the past, the moment Eren stopped being afraid, and experiencing it again, from the outside, lands with a weight that Leo doesn't have a simple category for. The demon is dispatched. The world stabilizes into its resolution state. Eren stands in the aftermath, looking at his own hands, and something in him has changed. The same something that changed 5,000 years ago, when the real Eren stood in that same position. The great shadow spirit Elsie manifests. Elsie is not a standard contractable spirit. The great shadow is an ancient entity. The concept of shadows, of the space between light and darkness, given awareness and intent. It operates in a category adjacent to what human summoning theory addresses, but not fully within it. Elsie has been present in Eren's hero world because Elsie was present in the original memory. The contract between Eren and Elsie was one of the defining events of Eren's early career, and the record preserved it. When Leo is present at the moment of that contract's original formation, Elsie looks at him. Not at Eren, at Leo. The great shadow spirit recognizes Kyle the way Luminous did, across the gap of millennia, through the surface of a new body and a rabbit-eared disguise, to the fundamental identity underneath. Elsie makes an assessment. The assessment produces a second contract offer. Leo accepts. The great shadow spirit's contract with Leo isn't a replacement for Eren's. It's separate, parallel, the kind of arrangement that ancient spirits can maintain across multiple contracted partners when the partners are sufficiently significant. Elsie's shadow abilities add something to Leo's arsenal that complements the blessing of light in a way that is thematically satisfying and practically devastating. Light defines shadows, shadows define the edges of light, and someone who controls both controls the perceptual architecture of any space they occupy. Leo, Fiora, Kirin, and now Elsie. The entity list attached to a single Lumina freshman is becoming something that would make senior adventuring parties nervous. R2 exits the hero world with the specific expression of someone who has been handed a puzzle that she doesn't have all the pieces for, but is absolutely committed to solving. She looks at the rabbit-eared beastman who just navigated a legendary hero's foundational memory from the inside, contracted with a great shadow spirit, and who she watched disintegrate a cyclops with one punch, and she files all of this in a mental category labeled something like, "Figure this out before it becomes a problem." She doesn't confront him. She's too smart to confront someone she doesn't fully understand yet. She watches. Leo wraps up the Azonia portion of the mission with the information he came for, settles the administrative irregularity of his enrollment application in a way that produces no official record worth examining, and returns to Lumina. The second semester begins with a test that most returning students treat as a formality. Vice Principal Riven runs it personally, which is the first signal that it isn't a formality. Riven is the administrative spine of Lumina, the person who keeps the institution's logistics functional while the headmaster operates at the level of grand strategy and long-term vision. She's precise, controlled, and operates with the efficiency of someone who has spent decades making difficult institutions work. Students who mistake her administrative role for a lesser position than the combat-focused professors generally learn otherwise fast. The test is called the Dragon Speech Illusion, a psychological evaluation disguised as a magical assessment. Riven activates a high-grade illusion construct that places the subject inside a realistic environment built to simulate extreme psychological pressure. The construct draws on the subject's own fears and memories to build its pressure points, which means it's never the same test twice. What it measures is not magical output or combat capability. It measures whether a person's sense of self holds together when the environment around them is designed to take it apart. Students with strong foundational identity, people who know who they are at a level that doesn't depend on external validation, pass it without significant difficulty. Students who have unresolved identity fractures or whose sense of self is built primarily on performance and social position tend to find the illusion much harder to navigate. The Academy uses it to identify students who need targeted support before the second semester's more intensive coursework creates additional pressure on those fractures. Leo enters the construct. The illusion builds around him. Past memories, altered timelines, versions of events where choices went differently, and people were lost in ways that his actual past involved. The construct reaches into 5,000 years of material, which is considerably more than it was designed for, and tries to find the pressure points. It finds plenty of material. It finds comrades lost, sacrifices made, the erasure, the isolation of carrying a history that nobody else can confirm. It does not find fractures. Leo's sense of self is built on something that the illusion cannot reach, not because he's unaffected by loss or untroubled by the erasure, but because his identity doesn't depend on anyone else's acknowledgement of it. Kyle existed. What Kyle did was real. Whether history records it correctly or not doesn't change what it was. The construct tries to use the erasure against him and finds that Leo has already made peace with it as a fact to fix rather than a wound to hide. He exits the illusion in a time frame that makes Riven look at her assessment instruments twice. Then he looks at Riven directly and tells her he knows who she is. Not what she is. The vice principal is a known quantity. Who she is, specifically, a descendant of the King of Wisdom, one of the ancient lineages from the Age of Calamity, a bloodline that Leo knew in his first life and that has been quietly maintaining its presence in the world across 5 millennia, in roles that provide influence without visibility. The King of Wisdom's descendants have a specific quality to their aura signature, a conceptual resonance that modern aura reading doesn't have the framework to identify, but that Leo recognizes the same way he recognizes Berkia's dagger or the Luna fragment's response to his presence. Riven goes still in the specific way of someone who has maintained a carefully managed information boundary for a very long time and has just found it crossed. She looks at Leo. Leo meets her gaze without elaboration, without threat, without the performance of someone making a power play. He's just telling her a fact, the way he tells people most facts, calmly, directly, as information they should have. What passes between them in the silence after that is not fully legible to anyone observing from outside. Riven asks one question. Leo answers it. The answer is something that only Kyle could know, something from the Age of Calamity that the King of Wisdom's descendants have been carrying as a verification across generations, a piece of truth maintained in their bloodline for exactly this kind of moment. Riven's expression changes, not dramatically, she's too controlled for dramatic, but the quality of her attention toward Leo shifts in a way that is permanent. She doesn't disclose anything to the faculty. She doesn't add a note to the official file. What she does is make a quiet, private decision that whatever Leo is doing in this academy, it has her cooperation to the extent her position allows. The King of Wisdom's bloodline was built on recognizing when the right person shows up. Riven is very good at her job. Leo goes back to class. The Guardsron mission assembles in the gap between second semester coursework and the next major tournament event. It's framed officially as an upper-level dungeon expedition, the kind of mission that involves real stakes and gets assigned to students who have demonstrated they can handle real stakes. The location is Guardsron, an ancient ruin site at the edge of the region, crumbled architecture from the Age of Calamity, mostly picked over by professional adventurers across the centuries, not considered a high-priority site by the major academies. Leo knows better. He also knows that the party composition for this mission, himself, Elena Jiren, Runia, and a fourth member named Hadin, is not an accident. Elena maneuvered herself into the group with the specific intention of extended proximity to Leo in an environment where the social structures of the academy don't apply, which is the most Elena possible reason to volunteer for a ruin expedition. She presents this as academic interest in the site's historical significance. Nobody is convinced, including Leo, who notes it and adds it to the ongoing file he maintains on Elena's escalating campaign. Elena is, for all her social maneuvering, genuinely capable. Her combat ability is not academy grade in the sense of being impressive for a student. It's actually impressive by the standards of the professional adventuring community. The third-year student council representative position undersells what she can do in a serious fight. Leo has noted this from the beginning. It's one of the reasons her interest in him reads as potentially useful rather than purely complicating. Runia brings elven environmental reading to the group, the ability to interpret ancient spaces using a sensitivity to spiritual residue that the Academy's standard magical assessment tools don't replicate. For a ruined site from the Age of Calamity, this is genuinely valuable. Hayden covers physical support. They arrive at Guardsron and begin the standard ruin assessment, mapping the accessible structures, identifying stable versus compromised sections, looking for the indicators that suggest deeper levels worth investigating. The surface ruins are consistent with what the professional adventuring records describe. Picked over, partially collapsed, historically interesting but not operationally significant. Then they find the sealed chamber. It's in the foundation level of what was once a significant structure, a building that the modern records don't have accurate information about because the records of Guardsron from the Age of Calamity are fragmentary. Leo knows what the building was because he was in it. It was a repository, one of the ancient record storage facilities used during the Age of Calamity to preserve hero fragments in a location that was intended to be both accessible and protected. The seal on the chamber is old enough that the sealing technique itself is from an era before the modern magical classification system existed. Standard academic magical analysis would look at it and produce inconclusive results. Leo looks at it and reads it like a document. The chamber contains a hero record, significant enough that the repository seal was rated at the highest tier available at the time of construction. The fragment inside belongs to Varharun, an ancient city, a location from the Age of Calamity, a place that Leo knows was significant and whose destruction was one of the events that defined the end of that era. He opens the seal using the same technique that sealed it, a method that requires knowing the foundational principles behind the seal's construction, not just the activation key. The chamber opens. The hero record inside activates the moment Leo's presence registers in the chamber. The pull is immediate and stronger than any standard fragment activation. The Varharun record doesn't offer access. It takes the group in. All four of them are inside before the pull completes, and the chamber is gone, replaced by something else entirely. Varharun, 5,000 years ago. Not a simulation. Not a training environment with modified safety parameters. The hero world of Varharun is built from the memory of the city itself. Its architecture, its people, its specific period of history. And it manifests with the completeness of something that was recorded by someone who loved the place and preserved it at the level of total fidelity. The streets are real in the sense that matters. They respond to presence, they carry consequence, and the things that happen in them leave marks. Elena's reaction to arriving in an ancient city is controlled. She's too experienced to let disorientation show, but her assessment of the environment is rapid and correctly alarmed. This is not a standard hero world. The parameters are different. The stability indicators that trained practitioners learn to read are present here, but they're fluctuating in a pattern that suggests external pressure. Something is pushing against the record from outside the memory. Leo already knows what it is. He felt the pressure the moment they landed. Erebus, a fragment of the Demon King's consciousness, not the full entity, not even a major portion of it, but a genuine fragment of the original ancient evil, preserved in a state of arrested wakefulness by the same erasure mechanism that removed Kyle's name from the records. The Varharun record is connected to something that Erebus once destroyed, and the fragment has been slowly working at the record's integrity, looking for a point of entry. It found one when Leo opened the chamber. He sets this aside for the moment. The immediate situation requires navigating the hero world, which means understanding what role the record has assigned. The world reads the group composition and distributes functions. Hadin and Runia receive supporting roles. Their presence is acknowledged, their abilities integrated into the world's logic at a level that lets them operate without being fully consumed by the narrative. Elena receives a role that gives her combat function within the world's context, which she accepts with the practical efficiency of someone who knows how to work a situation. Leo gets assigned as Professor Arkin. Again, different record, same role, which means something. Either it's a function of his energy signature, or it's a function of who Archon was in these events, or it's a function of the record recognizing what Leo is and assigning the role that fits him regardless of which memory it's pulling from. He puts on the role with the ease of someone returning to something familiar. And there, in the street of the ancient city of Varharoon, making a complete disaster of a spell she's been trying to learn for 3 weeks, is young Luna. The founder of Lumina Academy, 5,000 years before she was a founder, is a teenager with enormous magical potential and absolutely no confidence in her ability to use it. The magical output is clearly exceptional. The raw power behind her failed spells is the kind that makes professional mages quietly envious. But the execution is catastrophic. She's trying a precision casting that requires fine motor control of her magic energy distribution, and her magic energy does not want to be finely controlled. It wants to do something massive and slightly reckless. Luna, failing her spell for the 4th time in a row and surrounded by the evidence of the previous 3 attempts, does not notice that she has witnesses. Leo watches her for a moment. He's met the older Luna, the historical figure, the founder, the person whose records have been drifting through his current life as fragments and echoes. He's been carrying her flower-blooming spell in his memory for 5,000 years. He watched her develop it, offered feedback on the formula when she was still working out the derivation, sat with her in the evenings after the worst battles when she was trying to find a reason to keep going. This Luna doesn't know any of that. She looks up, sees a professor she recognizes. Professor Arkin is apparently someone she has complicated feelings about, based on the expression that crosses her face, and immediately tries to look like she was doing something intentional. Leo keeps his expression neutral and tells her what she's doing wrong. Not tactfully, directly. The error is in how she's distributing her magic energy at the initiation point. She's trying to control the output at the end of the casting sequence instead of setting the parameters at the beginning, which means she's fighting her own spell rather than directing it. It's a common mistake for high-output practitioners because their natural magic energy density is high enough that standard casting techniques don't give them sufficient control. The solution is a modified initiation sequence that sets tighter parameters before the energy starts moving. Luna stares at him. She's gotten advice from Professor Arkin before and it has never been this clear. She tries the modified sequence. The spell works. Perfectly, cleanly, with the precision she's been trying to achieve for weeks. Luna looks at the result, then at her own hands, then at Leo with an expression that goes through several stages before arriving at something between relief and suspicion. Because this was too easy. If the solution was that obvious, why hasn't anyone told her before? Leo tells her that most instructors watch for the most common version of the mistake and correct for that. Her mistake is the less common version that only appears when the practitioner's base output is high enough to overwhelm standard technique. Most instructors don't encounter it because most students don't have that much raw output. Luna processes this. Then she does something unexpected. She asks if he'll keep working with her. Leo says yes. Elena, watching this from a careful distance, has been cataloging the quality of Leo's interaction with young Luna and is arriving at conclusions she's not fully comfortable with. The way Leo talks to this girl, the patience that isn't soft, the directness that isn't harsh, the specific kind of attention that recognizes someone's actual capability rather than their apparent performance, it's not what a professor who just met a student looks like. It's what someone who knows someone looks like. She files this. They work through Varharoon's memory together, Leo guiding Luna through the city's history as the record presents it, building her confidence in her spellcraft through a series of practical problems that the world generates as part of its narrative logic. Luna starts to relax under the teaching. The catastrophic spell failures stop. What replaces them is magic that is occasionally messy, but deliberately messy, the kind of mess that comes from reaching for something real rather than the clean failure of someone trying not to make mistakes. Leo watches her grow into herself across the span of the world's progression and doesn't say what he knows. That this girl will build the academy that his current life passes through. That the magic theory she's developing in these weeks will become the foundational curriculum that modern students study. That the flower-blooming spell she eventually creates for him will travel 5,000 years and shatter an arrogant professor's assumptions about what human magic can do. He just teaches her, the way he would have taught her then, if then had gone differently. Then the fragment of Erebus stops waiting. The pressure that Leo has been monitoring since they arrived in Varharoon shifts from a steady push to an active assault. The world shudders, not physically, but structurally, the way a building shudders when something hits the foundation. The edges of the record start to deteriorate, ancient architecture dissolving into static, the peripheral people and spaces of the world's memory losing definition. Luna feels it and doesn't understand what it is. She's never encountered corruption at this level before. It's not something that exists in her current timeline as a known threat, and the sensation of having the world around her become unreliable is disorienting in a way that pulls directly at the confidence she's just been building. Leo stands up and faces the direction the pressure is coming from. Elena moves to his flank immediately. No instruction needed, no discussion. She's been tracking the world's structural indicators, and her read of the situation aligns with what Leo's posture is communicating. This is real, it's here, and it's time to stop navigating and start responding. Runia pulls Luna close and begins a containment working. Elven spiritual technique applied to the record's integrity. The same principle she used in the Elven forest, but deployed at a scale the forest situation didn't require. Hayden covers the perimeter. The fragment of Erebus manifests. It doesn't look like much at the initial moment of appearance, which is the point. Ancient evil operating at fragment capacity is dangerous precisely because it doesn't need to look like ancient evil. The fragment arrives as a distortion, a wrongness in the record's space, and then it begins to expand. The wrongness grows, and what grows from it is presence, the kind of pressure that beings of Erebus's fundamental nature generate simply by existing in a space. Not an attack, just the weight of what Erebus is, focused through a fragment, pressing on everything around it. Luna goes pale. The presence is affecting the world's memory in real time, corrupting the record from inside, touching the preserved moments and distorting them, turning Varharoon's carefully kept history into something darker and wrong. Leo steps forward and the blessing of light activates. Not aggressively, not as an attack, as a statement of presence. Light expanding outward from Leo in a radius that presses back against the fragment's weight, creating a space where the corruption cannot hold. The contrast is immediate and physical. Where the fragment's presence makes the world's memory distort and darken, the blessing makes it stabilize and clarify. Two fundamental principles occupying the same space and pushing in opposite directions. The fragment focuses on Leo, and Leo looks at it, the fragment of the demon king Erebus, the being responsible for erasing Kyle from history, the force behind everything that Tartarus has been doing to corrupt and destroy the world's hero records, with an expression that is calm and old and patient. He reaches for Phoenix breath. He reaches for the blessing of light. He reaches for Elsie's shadow. He reaches for everything he is. The boy who survived Phoenix fire, the man who fought demons across an entire age of the world, the hero whose name was erased but whose capabilities were not. Elena generates a combat formation beside him. Her power output, unrestrained, is genuinely staggering. This is Elena Jiren without the social performance of the student council representative, operating at what she actually is, and what she actually is belongs in a different category than most third-year students. Young Luna, standing behind Runia's containment with her hands clenched and her magic energy cycling in the modified initiation sequence Leo taught her, the one that finally lets her use her power correctly, makes a decision. She steps forward too. She doesn't have the experience. She doesn't have the context. She doesn't fully understand what she's stepping toward. But Luna, in every version of herself across every era, has never been someone who stays behind when something important is in front of her. She steps forward, and her magic energy rises, enormous, raw, the uncontrolled power that she's been learning to direct, now directed at something real for the first time. The fragment of Erebus regards the assembled group, the ancient hero in a young body carrying 5,000 years of memory, the impossibly capable third year who shouldn't be at this level, the elven girl maintaining record integrity against pressure that should have collapsed it already, and a teenage founder who doesn't know yet what she's going to build. The world shudders again. The edges continue dissolving. The hourglass of the record's integrity is running down, and the fragment knows it. If it can hold the pressure long enough for the record to collapse entirely, the corruption wins regardless of whether the group can fight it. Leo holds the light steady. Steady against the pressure. Steady against the weight of 5 millennia of anger and denial and erasure. Steady in the specific way of someone who has already decided that the outcome of this is not in question, only the path to it. And far above Guardsron, in the waking world where the sealed chamber sits silent, and the mission clock has been running far longer than a standard hero world engagement should take, the headmaster of Lumina Academy is watching an hourglass that has nothing to do with sand. He's watching it with the expression of someone who has been waiting a very long time for a very specific thing to happen. He doesn't intervene. He waits. Because the hourglass has its own logic, and the figure inside the collapsing world has something to prove. Not to the headmaster, not to history, not to the fragment of ancient evil pressing against the edges of a preserved memory. To himself, Leo plants his feet in the ancient street of Varharoon, in the last stable space inside a record that is coming apart around him, with an awakened fragment of the demon king Erebus building pressure 20 meters ahead, and a teenager who is going to found a legendary academy standing at his back. This is what Kyle survived for. The fragment doesn't rush. That's the first thing Leo notices about how it operates, and it tells him everything about its strategy. A fragment of Erebus, genuine consciousness derived from the original demon king, carrying the fundamental principle of corruption rather than just its surface expression, doesn't need to win quickly. It needs the record to collapse. Every second the world deteriorates, the fragment's position improves. The math favors patience. Leo doesn't give it patience. He moves first. Phoenix breath ignites at full output. Not the controlled, calibrated release he uses for speed or precision work, but the foundational pulse, the deep cycle that Zeiss Zerdinger recognized as something beyond normal aura mastery the first time he watched Leo train. The scarlet energy that Phoenix breath produces at full expression is warm in a specific way that has nothing to do with temperature. It carries the quality of something that persists, that doesn't extinguish, that the nature of Phoenix fire means it comes back from whatever tries to put it out. The blessing of light layers onto it. Luminous's gift doesn't add volume to Leo's output, it adds property. The fundamental light principle threaded through the Phoenix aura like a second element sharing the same channel. What emerges isn't two abilities running in parallel. It's something fused, something that didn't exist before Luminous reached into Leo's vessel and recognized what was already there. The fragment reacts, not by retreating, by escalating. The distortion at the fragment's center intensifies, the wrongness pulling inward like a wound drawing closed before erupting outward, the corruption principle expressing itself at a higher register, reaching past the record's deteriorating edges into the stable space Leo has been maintaining. The pressure doubles and then doubles again, a tidal weight of ancient evil focused into a single directional push. The record shudders. A building at the edge of Leo's stable radius dissolves, not collapses, dissolves, the stone and memory becoming static and then nothing. Luna makes a sound behind him, involuntary, watching Varharoon disappear piece by piece. Leo holds the perimeter. Elena engages from the flank. Her attack doesn't announce itself. Elena Jiren's combat philosophy is built on the principle that the most dangerous moment in a fight is the one your opponent doesn't see coming. Which means she's been spending the time since the fragment manifested positioning herself in the geometry of the space where her output does the most structural damage. She hits the fragment from the side with a concentrated strike that isn't in the standard Academy classification system. It's something she developed herself, somewhere between advanced aura technique and conceptual force application, the product of a genuinely exceptional practitioner who has been pushing past her curriculum for years. The fragment absorbs it. Not easily, the impact registers, the distortion at the fragment's center flickering under the pressure, but it absorbs. A fragment of Erebus carries the full corruption principle in condensed form, which means its defensive architecture is built on the same logic as its offensive. It converts incoming force into more corruption, feeds on what hits it, and grows stronger in proportion to what gets thrown at it. Elena's strike feeds it. She pulls back immediately, reading the response before the counterattack fully forms. The fragment's return pressure reaches the space she just vacated and finds nothing, which costs it momentum. Elena is already repositioning. Leo calls across the space to her without looking away from the fragment. He tells her the architecture, the specific reason that direct force application feeds rather than damages, the principle behind Erebus's corruption method that makes standard combat engagement counterproductive. He tells her quickly, the way you explain something to someone capable of using the information immediately. Elena absorbs it in real time and adjusts without breaking stride. What works against the corruption principle isn't force, it's opposition at the fundamental level, not hitting it harder, but hitting it with something that is structurally incompatible. Light, in its conceptual form, is incompatible with corruption, not because it's stronger, but because they're opposites at the level of what they are. You can't corrupt something that is actively expressing its fundamental nature as uncorrupted. The two principles cancel rather than combining. The blessing of light isn't just good against dark magic in the way that one element counters another. It's good against corruption specifically because it operates on the same level of reality that corruption does. The conceptual layer, the space where things are what they are, rather than what they appear to be. Leo drives forward. The pressure from the fragment is enormous in a way that physical description doesn't fully capture. It's not wind resistance or gravity or the force of a physical impact. It's more like trying to move through the weight of the idea that moving is impossible. Erebus's corruption works on certainty, on the solid conviction that things cannot be different from how they are. That darkness is inevitable, that records can be erased, that heroes die and are forgotten, and the world moves on without them. Leo walks through it. Not because it doesn't affect him. It does. The weight is real, the pressure is real, and 5,000 years of memories that the fragment is reaching for, pulling at the loss, the erasure, the comrades who died, the history that was stolen, those are real too. The fragment is doing what corruption does, finding the true things that hurt and using them. But Leo made his peace with every one of those truths before he was old enough in this life to walk. He processed the erasure in a crib. He buried Berkia's dagger in a forest and picked it up again. He stood in Luna's memory and taught her how to use her power, and didn't let the grief of knowing what was coming for her stop him from doing what she needed in the moment. The weight of corruption is built on the premise that the things it uses haven't been faced. Leo has faced all of them. He reaches the fragment's perimeter and the blessing of light hits the corruption principle at contact range. Not a strike, not a cast, just presence. The two fundamentals meeting at zero distance. The fragment's surface expression destabilizes immediately, the wrongness stuttering where the light property touches it, the conversion architecture trying to process something it cannot convert. Elsie manifests. The great shadow spirit doesn't materialize in any dramatic sense. Shadows don't announce themselves. One moment the space around Leo has the shadows that Varharoon's ambient light produces, and the next, those shadows are doing something deliberate. Elsie's domain is the space between light and darkness, the edges where one becomes the other, and in a hero world built from preserved memory, those edges are everywhere. In every building's interior, under every overhang, in every place where the preserved light doesn't fully reach. Elsie takes all of them simultaneously. The fragment's corruption has been operating with a fixed spatial footprint. The distortion radiates from its center point outward, which means its influence diminishes at distance but is overwhelming at the center. Elsie's shadow manipulation redistributes the spatial logic. The shadows that appear inside the fragment's influence zone are not neutral ground. They're extensions of Elsie's domain, which means they carry the property of the space between light and corruption, a space the corruption principle has no claim over. The fragment's spatial footprint fragments. The single overwhelming center becomes multiple smaller nodes trying to maintain coherence, and coherence at lower density is considerably easier to address. Elena sees the opening and takes it. She doesn't use force this time. Following Leo's explanation, she applies something different. Her aura expressed not as a strike but as a suppression field, a technique that constrains the expression of whatever it covers rather than damaging it directly. Suppression prevents the corruption nodes from recombining, keeps the fragmented state stable, while Leo works through them individually. It's exactly the right move. Leo makes a mental note that Elena's combat intelligence, deployed towards something other than maneuvering Academy social dynamics, is genuinely impressive. He works through the nodes, one at a time, methodically, the blessing of light at contact range, disrupting each corruption cluster at the fundamental level. It's not fast. The fragment fights the process. Each node tries to pull back toward the center, tries to recombine, tries to find any gap in the suppression field or the light pressure to re-establish the overwhelming single-point presence. Leo closes every gap. Elena maintains every suppression point. Elsie holds the spatial disruption. Young Luna has been watching this from behind Runia's containment. She's been watching Leo move through something she can feel but can't fully perceive. Watching Elena operate at a level that makes the Academy's ranking system feel like a measuring cup trying to quantify an ocean. Watching the world around them dissolve at the edges while the three people in front of her hold a space that should have collapsed 10 minutes ago. She's been working with the modified initiation sequence Leo taught her, running it repeatedly, feeling the difference it makes. The precision available to her when her magic energy is correctly parameterized at the start rather than fought into shape at the end. Her raw output, which has always been her problem rather than her asset because she couldn't control it, is now something she can actually direct. She's been directing it into Runia's containment, reinforcing the record integrity from inside. She didn't tell anyone she was doing this. She just started doing it because the containment was under pressure and she had power available, and the modified sequence gave her enough control to apply it without making things worse. The record stability, which should have continued declining under the fragment's pressure, has been holding steady. Runia realizes what's happening and adjusts her technique to integrate Luna's contribution. The containment becomes something neither of them could have built alone. Elven's spiritual technique providing the framework, Luna's enormous raw output providing the energy. The combination creating a record integrity field that is actively pushing back against the dissolution at the edges. Varharun stops disappearing. The buildings at the perimeter stabilize. The static at the edges pulls back. The memory of the ancient city reasserts itself, stone by stone, moment by moment, the record recovering integrity in the spaces where the fragment's pressure is being held back. Leo drives the last corruption node to zero. The fragment convulses. The central distortion, smaller now, depleted by the node work, operating without the coherent spatial footprint it had at the beginning, pulls inward sharply. A final escalation, the fragment burning through everything it has left to try and recapture the initiative. Leo raises his hand and calls Fiora. The baby phoenix emerges from wherever phoenix familiars go when they're not manifested, and arrives in Leo's palm as a small, ridiculous, furious bird that immediately understands that something in this space needs to be on fire, and begins emitting the ancient flame at an output that her size does not suggest is possible. Phoenix fire at the conceptual level, the real fire, the kind Leo stood in during the contract, is precisely the opposite of corruption in the same way that the blessing of light is. Phoenix fire doesn't destroy, it transforms. It takes what is broken or wrong or dead and burns it into something that can become new. Fiora directs it at the fragment's final convulsion, with an accuracy that suggests the baby chick is considerably more aware of what she's doing than she looks. The corruption principle, caught between the blessing of light, Elsie's shadow domain, Elena's suppression field, Luna and Runia's record integrity, and a phoenix's transformative fire, runs out of room. The fragment collapses. Not dramatically, not with a sound or a shockwave or a display of power. It contracts to a point, and then it isn't there. The pressure vanishes so suddenly that the absence of it is almost disorienting. The space where the weight was is just space again. The air in Varharun clean and old and smelling like a city that existed 5,000 years ago and was remembered faithfully by someone who loved it. Luna sits down on the cobblestones of the ancient street. She doesn't fall. She chooses to sit, slowly and deliberately, because her legs have made a suggestion and she's decided to act on it. She looks at the stabilized city around her, Varharun intact, the edges of the record solid, the world holding, and then at her own hands. The magic energy she pushed into Runia's containment is still cycling in the modified sequence. Her control is exhausted, but it's hers. She did it. She looks up at Leo. He's already watching her. Professor Archin's expression, as far as young Luna can read it, is something she doesn't have a word for. Not proud, exactly. Not surprised. Definitely not surprised. Something like recognition, like he's seeing something that was always going to be there, finally showing up in the place it was always headed. She asks him, quietly, in the way of someone who has just done something they didn't know they could do and needs to verify that it was real. She asks if they held it. Leo tells her they did. Elena is running her own assessment of the space, checking the suppression field's dissolution, cataloging the fragment's collapse, making sure there are no residual corruption nodes hiding in the peripheral spaces. She's doing this with a methodical efficiency that suggests she's had practice cleaning up after significant events and doesn't trust the obvious reading of a situation until she's verified the edges. She glances at Leo during this process and notes that he's talking to young Luna the way he talks to people he's known for a very long time. She's been noting this since they arrived in the world. She files it differently now, not as an anomaly requiring explanation, but as a data point in a picture she's assembling, one that is getting clearer with each addition. Runia releases the containment carefully. The way you release something load-bearing only when you've confirmed what it was holding is no longer under pressure. The record's integrity reads stable. The dissolution at the edges has stopped. Varharun holds. The hero world begins its resolution process. The narrative logic of the record completing its cycle now that the external pressure is gone. The city around them grows softer at the edges, the memory's fidelity beginning to gentle as the world prepares to close. Young Luna feels it before she can articulate what she's feeling. The sense of something ending, of the preserved moment completing itself. She stands up, looks at Leo one more time. She says something that she doesn't fully know the meaning of yet, that she wants to build something that lasts. Not a monument, not a record, specifically. Something that teaches, something that keeps the knowledge of what people like this did, so that the people who come after them aren't starting from nothing. Leo looks at her and says, "That sounds like a good use of a lifetime." She doesn't know that he knows she'll do exactly that. The world closes. The return is the standard disorientation of exiting a hero record, a moment of sensory reconstruction as the real world reasserts itself over the memory's logic. The chamber in Guardsron's foundation level solidifies around them, walls and floor and the inert hero record fragment in its housing. Elena is the first one on her feet. She looks at the group, assesses everyone's condition in the brisk way of someone running a post-engagement check, and determines that the mission is complete. She says this with the same authority she brings to everything, and nobody argues with her because she's right. Leo picks up the Luna fragment, secured, stable now, the record's integrity reinforced by what happened inside rather than depleted by it. He wraps it with the same care he used in the Elven Forest. 2 fragments of Luna's record now in his possession, both recovered from situations where Tartarus was trying to corrupt or access them. The picture of what Tartarus is actually trying to do is becoming clearer. Not just destroying hero records at random, specifically targeting Luna's records. Specifically working to corrupt or eliminate the preserved legacy of the person who founded the academy that trains the next generation of heroes, whose magic theory underpins half of modern sorcery, whose connection to the Age of Calamity is the closest bridge between what Kyle's era accomplished and what the current era needs to know. If you wanted to undermine the hero lineage at its foundation, not just remove individual heroes but corrupt the source of heroic knowledge and tradition itself, you'd go after Luna. You'd go after her records, her theory, the preserved wisdom that the academy system is built on. Leo files this with the specific calm of someone who has added a new piece to a puzzle they've been working on for 5,000 years. They climb out of Guardsron's ruins into the late afternoon. The exterior is exactly as they left it. Ancient stone, overgrown. The professional adventuring community's assessment of this site as picked over and unremarkable, unchanged by whatever just happened in its foundation. Runia looks back at the ruins as they leave. She's been in difficult spaces before. The Elven Forest, the Negrong lockdown, the Lauder confrontation, but this one sits differently. She was inside a memory of a city from the Age of Calamity, holding its record integrity against a fragment of Erebus, with a professor who navigated that memory from the inside. She doesn't say what she's thinking, she walks. Hayden, who has been the most practically grounded member of the group throughout the expedition, makes the logistical observation that they're going to need to write a report about this, and that the report is going to be interesting to write. Leo agrees that it will be. Elena falls into step beside him as they move away from the ruins. She doesn't ask the questions she's accumulated. She's not the type to ask questions she doesn't have sufficient data to frame correctly. What she does is make a statement, quiet enough that it's directed at him specifically, rather than the group. She says she's starting to think that her plan to make Leo her personal project was less a bold initiative on her part and more a very natural response to something she was always going to find significant. She says this with the particular self-awareness of someone who knows when they've walked into something larger than they planned for and has decided to be honest about it. Leo looks at her sideways. He says that sounds like something she should think carefully about before committing to. Elena says she is very good at careful thinking and has been doing quite a lot of it. The walk back to the transport point continues. Above Guardsron, the afternoon light is the specific quality of late day in a place that has been old for a very long time. Somewhere in the academy they're returning to, the headmaster is watching an hourglass that is still running and reaching conclusions at a pace that his position requires. In Tartarus, something registers the fragment's collapse, a signal across the network of demonic operations that was relying on that fragment as a point of access into the hero record system. The signal reaches a level of the hierarchy that doesn't deal with individual students and individual hero worlds, a level that begins to pay attention. The next threat isn't a corrupted senior with a demonic ring. It isn't a possessed freshman or a destabilized lecture fragment or a knight-ranked demon in an exam dungeon. What's coming is something that has noticed that the thing blocking Tartarus's operations in the hero record system isn't a defense mechanism, or a lucky accident, or a faculty intervention. It's a single student, a student who knows too much, moves too precisely, holds ancient techniques that shouldn't exist in a living practitioner, and keeps arriving at exactly the points where Tartarus is operating, not after the fact, but in time. Like he knows where they're going before they get there. The level of Tartarus that begins paying attention is not one that sends death knights and possessed ring-bearers. It sends things worth worrying about. Leo doesn't know the exact form of what's coming yet. He has the shape of it, the pattern of Tartarus's escalation, the logic of how the Demon King's forces respond when their ground-level operations fail. He's seen this sequence before, not with these specific people, not in this specific era, but the logic is old and it follows old rules. He has time, not unlimited time, but enough. Enough to keep gathering his party, keep recovering the fragments, keep building the understanding of what the erasure was and how it was executed, and what reversing it requires. He thinks about Luna sitting in the street of Varharun, asking if they held it. He thinks about the flower-blooming spell she'll create. He thinks about the dagger in his possession, Berkia's weapon surviving 5,000 years in an elven forest, finding its way back to the hand it was made for. Things persist. That's the thing Erebus's corruption principle keeps failing to account for, that the things it erases don't stop being true. The record can be corrupted, the name can be removed, the history can be rewritten, and the textbooks can leave him out, and the modern world can read the story of the Age of Calamity and find no Kyle anywhere in it. He was still there, he's still here. That's what the corruption doesn't have an answer for. Leo walks back through the ancient ruins toward the world he's rebuilding, one recovered fragment at a time, with a phoenix in his collar, and a fairy king's heir in his pocket, and the shadow of a great spirit following his footsteps, and the blessing of an ancient light woven through everything he is. Whatever is coming from Tartarus, it's going to find exactly what every other piece of it has found, not an academy student, the hero of the beginning.